The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training grounds as Sarah Martinez carefully unwrapped her rifle from its protective cloth. The weapon gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights of the armory, but it wasn't the standard military issue that caught everyone's attention. Delicate pink flowers had been painted along the barrel, intertwined with golden vines that seemed to dance in the light. Small butterflies decorated the stock, and inspirational quotes and elegant script adorned various parts of the weapon. "What in the world is that supposed to be?" sneered Corporal James Bennett, his voice dripping with disdain. He stood with a group of fellow soldiers, all staring at Sarah's rifle with expressions ranging from amusement to outright mockery. Did someone confuse the army with an art class? Sarah's jaw tightened, but she kept her eyes focused on her weapon as she began the routine inspection. She had expected this reaction. It was the same everywhere she went, every training exercise, every deployment. The decorated rifle had become both her trademark and her burden. "Look at that," whispered Private Miller to his buddy. "She's got butterflies on her gun. What's next, unicorns?" The comment triggered a wave of snickers from the surrounding soldiers. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez approached the group, his heavy boots echoing against the concrete floor. "What's all the commotion here?" His eyes fell on Sarah's rifle, and his expression shifted to one of barely concealed irritation. "Martinez, what is this circus act? This is the United States Army, not some hobby craft fair." Sarah straightened her shoulders and looked directly at her superior officer. "Sir, the rifle meets all military specifications and has passed every inspection. The decorations don't interfere with its functionality in any way." "Functionality?" Rodriguez scoffed. "What about respect? What about tradition? You think the enemy is going to be intimidated by flower power?" The sergeant's voice grew louder, attracting more attention from soldiers throughout the armory. "This is a weapon of war, not a garden ornament." The crowd around them had grown larger, with soldiers abandoning their own equipment to witness the spectacle. Sarah could feel dozens of eyes boring into her, could hear the whispered comments and barely suppressed laughter. This wasn't new to her, but it never got easier. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in a different line of work," Martinez suggested Lieutenant Thompson as he joined the growing circle. "Maybe interior decorating? Or kindergarten teaching? Somewhere your artistic talents would be more appropriate." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she continued her weapon maintenance, but her voice remained steady. "Sir, with all due respect, my service record speaks for itself. I've completed every mission assigned to me, passed every qualification test, and exceeded standards in marksmanship training." "Yeah, right," muttered Corporal Bennett. "Probably shoots as pretty as her gun looks. All style, no substance." The comment stung because Sarah knew what lay beneath their ridicule. It wasn't just about the rifle's appearance. It was about her being different, about not fitting into their narrow definition of what a soldier should be. She was one of only a handful of women in her unit, and the decorated rifle had become a symbol of everything they saw as weakness. "Tell you what, Martinez," Staff Sergeant Rodriguez said with a cruel smile. "Why don't you show us all how effective that pretty little art project of yours is? Range practice starts in 30 minutes. Let's see if those butterflies can help you hit a target." The suggestion was met with enthusiastic approval from the crowd. Sarah could see the anticipation in their faces, the eager expectation of her failure. They wanted her to embarrass herself, to prove their point that she didn't belong here. "I'll be happy to demonstrate, sir," Sarah replied quietly, her voice carrying a strength that surprised even her. As the group began to disperse, Sarah overheard fragments of conversations that cut deep into her confidence. "This should be good," someone said. "Finally, we'll see what she's really made of." Another voice added, "I bet she can't hit the broadside of a barn with that fancy toy." Sarah's mind drifted to the story behind her rifle's decoration, a story none of these soldiers knew or would understand. The flowers weren't random pretty designs. Each pink blossom represented a fallen comrade, a friend she had lost in combat. The butterflies symbolized the souls she believed had found peace. The golden vines connected them all, representing the unbreakable bonds between soldiers who had served together. She had started decorating the rifle during her first deployment, after losing her best friend in a roadside bombing. Lieutenant Maria Santos had been like a sister to her, someone who understood the challenges of being a woman in a male-dominated environment. When Maria died, Sarah felt lost, disconnected from everything that had given her purpose. The first flower had been painted in Maria's honor, a small pink rose near the trigger guard. Other decorations had followed as Sarah lost more friends, each addition carrying deep personal meaning. What others saw as frivolous decoration was actually a moving memorial to the brave souls who had paid the ultimate price. But Sarah had learned to keep these explanations to herself. Early attempts to share the story had been met with eye rolls and accusations of being overly dramatic. The soldiers around her seemed incapable of understanding that something could be both beautiful and meaningful, both feminine and fierce. As she finished cleaning her rifle, Sarah noticed a young private watching her from across the room. Private Johnson was new to the unit, barely 18 and clearly overwhelmed by military life. He had been catching grief from the other soldiers for his slight build and quiet demeanor. "Pretty cool rifle," Johnson said quietly when the others were out of earshot. Sarah looked up, surprised by the genuine comment. "Thank you. Most people don't see it that way." "I think it's brave," the young soldier continued. "Takes guts to be yourself when everyone wants you to be something else." For the first time that morning, Sarah smiled. Sometimes being different is the hardest battle we fight. As they spoke, Sarah noticed that Johnson's hands were shaking slightly as he handled his own weapon. His nervousness was obvious, and she could see the fear in his eyes. She recognized the look because she had worn it herself not so long ago. "First time on the range?" she asked gently. Johnson nodded, looking embarrassed. "I barely qualified in basic training. I'm terrified I'm going to mess up in front of everyone." Sarah's heart went out to the young soldier. She remembered her own early days, the constant pressure to prove herself, the fear of failure that kept her awake at night. She also remembered how isolated she had felt, how desperately she had wanted someone to believe in her. "Listen," she said, lowering her voice. "The range can be intimidating, especially with everyone watching. But here's something I learned: the target doesn't care what you look like or how others see you. It only cares about your focus and your technique." Johnson listened intently as Sarah shared some basic tips about breathing, stance, and sight alignment. She spoke with the confidence of someone who had mastered her craft through years of dedicated practice, but also with the compassion of someone who remembered struggling. Their conversation was interrupted when Staff Sergeant Rodriguez's voice boomed across the armory. "All right, people. Range time. Let's see who can actually shoot and who's just playing dress-up with their weapons." The group began moving toward the shooting range, and Sarah could feel the weight of expectation settling on her shoulders. She knew that this wasn't just another practice session. This was her chance to prove herself once again, to show that her differences didn't make her weak. As they walked, Corporal Bennett fell into step beside her. "You know, Martinez, when you inevitably embarrass yourself out there, you might want to consider switching to a weapon more suited to your artistic nature. Maybe a paintball gun?" His comment drew laughter from the soldiers around them, but Sarah didn't respond. She had learned that engaging with their taunts only encouraged more of the same. Instead, she focused on the feeling of her rifle in her hands, the familiar weight and balance that had become second nature to her. The shooting range stretched out before them, a series of targets at various distances. Sarah had spent countless hours on similar ranges, honing her skills until they became instinctive. She knew that her decorated rifle was more than just a pretty ornament. It was an extension of herself, a tool she had mastered through dedication and discipline. But, as she took her position on the firing line, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that today would be different. There was something in the air, a tension that went beyond the usual hazing and mockery. She sensed that this demonstration would have consequences far beyond a simple range exercise. The other soldiers took their positions, some confident and cocky, others nervous and unsure. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez walked behind the firing line, making comments and adjustments to soldiers' stances. When he reached Sarah, he stopped and stared at her rifle for a long moment. Last chance to trade that art project for a real weapon, Martinez, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. Sarah looked down at her rifle, at the delicate flowers and butterflies that had been painted with such care and love. Each decoration told a story, carried a memory, honored a life. This wasn't just her weapon, it was her tribute to those who had served beside her and paid the ultimate price. "No thank you, sir," she replied firmly. "This rifle and I have been through a lot together. I wouldn't trade it for anything." Rodriguez shrugged, as if her response was exactly what he had expected from someone who clearly didn't understand military culture. "Your choice, soldier. Don't say we didn't warn you when you're picking flowers instead of hitting targets." As the range master began calling out commands, Sarah closed her eyes for a moment and thought about Maria, about all the friends she had lost, about the young private who was counting on her to succeed. She thought about every person who had doubted her, every comment about her rifle being too pretty for combat, every suggestion that she didn't belong in the army. When she opened her eyes, Sarah felt a familiar calm settle over her. This was what she had trained for, what she excelled at despite all the obstacles placed in her path. The decorated rifle might look different from everyone else's, but it was still a precision instrument in the hands of a skilled soldier. The first command rang out across the range, "Shooters, prepare to fire." The command echoed across the firing range as Sarah settled into her shooting stance. Around her, 23 other soldiers prepared their weapons, the metallic sounds of rifle actions cycling creating a symphony of military precision. Sarah's decorated rifle stood out like a wildflower in a field of steel, but her grip was as steady as granite. "Begin firing sequence," the range master commanded. The first volley erupted across the range, muzzle flashes lighting up the covered shooting positions. Sarah squeezed her trigger with practiced precision, feeling the familiar recoil against her shoulder. Downrange, her target showed the unmistakable mark of a perfect center hit. Corporal Bennett, shooting from the position next to her, glanced over and saw his own target sporting a hit several inches off-center. He scowled and adjusted his aim for the next round, muttering under his breath about equipment malfunctions. As the shooting exercise continued, a pattern began to emerge. Sarah's target accumulated hit after hit in the center ring, creating a tight group that would have made any instructor proud. Meanwhile, the soldiers who had been mocking her rifle were struggling with their own accuracy. "Cease fire." "Weapons safe," came the command after the first string of shots. Range personnel moved downrange to score the targets while the soldiers waited in formation. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez walked behind the firing line, his clipboard ready to record the scores that would determine everything from weekend passes to promotion recommendations. "Bennett, what happened out there?" Rodriguez asked as they waited. "You usually shoot better than that." "Just warming up, Sergeant," Bennett replied, though his confidence seemed shaken. He had been so focused on watching Sarah's performance that he had lost concentration on his own shooting. When the range personnel returned with the scored targets, a hush fell over the group. The range master began calling out scores, starting from the left side of the firing line. "Johnson, 68 out of 100. Needs improvement, but not bad for a rookie." Private Johnson looked relieved that he hadn't completely embarrassed himself. Sarah gave him an encouraging nod from her position several spots down the line. "Williams, 72. Peterson, 81. Bennett." The range master paused, looking at the target with obvious disappointment. "Bennett, 73. That's below your usual standard, Corporal." Bennett's face flushed red as snickers erupted from some of the other soldiers. The man who had been leading the charge against Sarah's rifle had shot worse than the nervous rookie. The range master continued down the line, calling out scores that ranged from the high 60s to the low 90s. These were experienced soldiers, most of whom had been shooting for years, yet none of them had achieved what would be considered exceptional scores. "Martinez," the range master called out, reaching Sarah's position. He looked at her target, then looked again, his eyebrows rising in surprise. "Martinez, 98 out of 100. Outstanding marksmanship." A stunned silence fell over the group. 98 was nearly perfect, the kind of score that even seasoned marksmen rarely achieved. Sarah's decorated rifle had just outperformed every standard military weapon on the range. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez snatched the target from the range master's hands, studying it closely as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The bullet holes formed a cluster so tight they were almost touching, centered perfectly in the high-scoring ring. "There must be some mistake," Rodriguez muttered. "Run the scores again." The range master, a veteran with 20 years of experience, shook his head. "No mistake, Sergeant. That's some of the finest shooting I've seen in years. That soldier knows how to handle her weapon." The compliment hung in the air like smoke from the rifle barrels. Sarah stood at attention, her expression neutral despite the vindication she felt inside. She had proven her point without saying a word, letting her rifle do the talking in the language everyone understood: precision. "Lucky shot," Bennett said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Anyone can get lucky once." "Then, let's see if luck strikes twice," Rodriguez declared, clearly frustrated by the unexpected turn of events. "Martinez, you're up for the advanced course. Moving targets, multiple distances, time pressure. Let's see how your art project handles real challenges." Sarah nodded calmly. "Ready when you are, Sergeant." The advanced course was typically reserved for soldiers who had already demonstrated exceptional marksmanship skills. It involved engaging targets at distances ranging from 100 to 500 meters, some stationary, others moving, all within strict time limits that tested both accuracy and speed. As the range crew set up the advanced targets, word began to spread throughout the training facility about the soldier with the decorated rifle who was out shooting everyone. Other instructors and soldiers from different units started gathering around the range to witness the unusual spectacle. Master Sergeant Thompson, the senior non-commissioned officer for the entire training battalion, arrived with several other high-ranking personnel. He was known for his no-nonsense approach to soldier development and his particular expertise in marksmanship training. "What's this I hear about a soldier with flowers on her rifle?" Thompson asked Rodriguez. "Sir, we have a situation with Specialist Martinez. She's unconventional in her approach to weapon decoration, but I admit her initial scores were impressive." Thompson studied Sarah's rifle with the eye of someone who had seen thousands of weapons in his career. The pink flowers and golden vines were indeed unusual, completely outside military norms, yet there was something about the craftsmanship that spoke of deep personal meaning. "Specialist Martinez," Thompson called out. "Front and center." Sarah approached the master sergeant and stood at attention. "Yes, sir. I understand you've been getting some attention for your rifle's appearance. Care to explain your reasoning behind these modifications?" For a moment, Sarah considered giving the simple answer, the one that would avoid conflict and keep her personal pain private. But something in Thompson's tone suggested genuine interest rather than mockery. "Sir, each decoration represents a fallen comrade from my previous deployments. The flowers honor their memory, and the design keeps their sacrifice close to my heart while I serve." Thompson's expression shifted as the true meaning behind the decorations became clear. This wasn't frivolous decoration or artistic expression. It was a soldier's deeply personal way of honoring the dead. "I see," Thompson said quietly. "And how many deployments have you completed, Specialist?" "3 combat deployments, sir. Afghanistan twice, Iraq once." A murmur rippled through the gathered crowd. 3 combat deployments was significant experience, especially for someone of Sarah's apparent age. Suddenly, her rifle's decorations took on an entirely different meaning. "Proceed with the advanced course," Thompson ordered. "I want to see what this soldier can do." The advanced course began with long-range stationary targets at 300 meters. Sarah settled into a supported prone position, her breathing controlled and methodical. Through her scope, the target appeared crisp and clear despite the distance. The first shot rang out, and spotters immediately called hit, center ring. The second shot followed quickly, then the third, each one finding its mark with mechanical precision. "Time," called the range master as Sarah completed the first stage. "Perfect score, 6 shots, 6 hits in the center ring." The crowd that had gathered began to take notice. Perfect scores on long-range shooting were rare enough that experienced soldiers stopped what they were doing to watch. The next stage involved moving targets at varying distances. Electronic pop-up targets would appear for limited time windows, requiring the shooter to acquire, aim, and fire quickly while maintaining accuracy. Ready, called the range master. Begin. The first target popped up at 200 meters, visible for only 8 seconds. Sarah's rifle cracked, and the target dropped immediately. A second target appeared at 150 meters, then a third at 250 meters. Each time, Sarah's response was instant and accurate. Corporal Bennett watched in growing amazement and frustration. The woman he had been mocking was demonstrating marksmanship skills that exceeded his own by a significant margin. Her decorated rifle, which he had dismissed as a foolish distraction, was proving to be in the hands of a truly exceptional shooter. "Impossible," he whispered to Private Miller. "Nobody shoots that well consistently. There's got to be something wrong with the course setup." But Master Sergeant Thompson was watching with the trained eye of an expert, and he saw nothing wrong except his own growing respect for Sarah's abilities. Her shooting technique was textbook perfect, her emotional control remarkable, and her weapon handling completely professional. The final stage of the advanced course was the most challenging: multiple targets at varying distances, some stationary, others moving, all appearing within a compressed time frame that tested a shooter's ability to prioritize targets and engage them efficiently. Sarah took her position and waited for the signal. When it came, chaos erupted downrange as targets began appearing and disappearing in rapid succession. But Sarah didn't see chaos. She saw opportunities. Her rifle moved smoothly from target to target, each shot deliberate and precise. The decorated weapon that had been ridiculed as inappropriate for combat was now demonstrating exactly why it had earned its owner's trust through 3 deployments. Time. The final command echoed across the range. The spotters downrange began calling out results: Target 1, hit. Target 2, hit. Target 3, hit. The list continued until all 8 targets had been accounted for, each one successfully engaged. Master Sergeant Thompson looked at the final score sheet with undisguised amazement. "Specialist Martinez, you have just completed the advanced marksmanship course with a perfect score. In 22 years of military service, I have seen this achieved exactly 3 times." The silence that followed was deafening. Every soldier who had been mocking Sarah's rifle now found themselves staring at a marksman whose skills exceeded their own by orders of magnitude. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Sir, this is unexpected. Martinez has always been a competent soldier, but these scores are..." "These scores are exceptional," Thompson interrupted. "And they raise some important questions about how we evaluate our personnel." Sarah stood at attention, her rifle held in the perfect position, its pink flowers and golden butterflies somehow looking less out of place than they had an hour earlier. She could see the stunned faces around her, the mixture of shock and grudging respect in their expressions. But she also knew that this was just the beginning. Excellence in marksmanship was one thing, but changing minds and earning true acceptance would require something more. The decorated rifle had proven it could perform, but the real test would be whether these soldiers could see past their preconceptions about what a warrior should look like. Private Johnson approached her after the crowd began to disperse, his eyes wide with admiration. "That was incredible. I've never seen shooting like that." "Practice," Sarah replied simply. "Lots and lots of practice." But, as she said it, she knew there was more to it than that. The rifle in her hands wasn't just a weapon, it was a connection to every friend she had lost, every mission she had completed, every moment when her life had depended on her ability to place a bullet exactly where she intended. The flowers weren't just decorations. They were reminders of why precision mattered, why every shot had to count, why failure wasn't an option when lives hung in the balance. As the soldiers began cleaning their weapons and preparing to leave the range, Sarah noticed that the conversations around her had changed. Instead of mocking comments about her rifle's appearance, she heard whispered discussions about her shooting technique and questions about her military experience. The change was subtle but significant. For the first time since joining this unit, Sarah felt like she was being seen as a soldier rather than as an oddity to be ridiculed. But she also knew that one impressive performance wouldn't be enough to completely change attitudes that had been formed over years of military tradition. The real challenge would come in the days and weeks ahead, when the memory of today's scores faded and she had to continue proving herself in countless small ways. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah's remarkable performance on the shooting range, and the atmosphere around her had shifted in subtle but meaningful ways. The open mockery had largely disappeared, replaced by a cautious respect that felt both welcome and fragile. However, not everyone had been converted by her display of marksmanship excellence. Corporal Bennett had become increasingly resentful of the attention Sarah was receiving. During morning formations, he would make subtle comments about show-offs and attention-seekers that everyone knew were directed at her. His wounded pride had transformed into something darker, a determination to prove that one good day on the range didn't make someone a real soldier. The opportunity he had been waiting for came during a routine training exercise in urban combat scenarios. The unit was preparing for potential deployment to regions where fighting in built-up areas was a constant reality. Master Sergeant Thompson had designed a complex exercise involving room clearing, target identification, and split-second decision-making under pressure. "Listen up, people," Thompson announced to the assembled soldiers. "Today's exercise is about more than just shooting accurately. You'll be dealing with civilian populations, friendly forces, and enemy combatants all mixed together. One wrong decision could mean disaster in a real combat situation." The training facility had been set up to simulate a small town, complete with buildings, alleyways, and hidden positions where both friendly and hostile targets could appear without warning. Electronic sensors would track every shot fired and determine whether the soldiers had engaged appropriate targets while protecting innocent bystanders. Sarah checked her rifle one final time, her fingers tracing over the familiar decorations that had become a source of both pride and burden. The pink flowers seemed especially vibrant in the artificial lighting of the training facility, and she noticed several soldiers still staring at them with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed disdain. "Martinez," Staff Sergeant Rodriguez called out. "Your team leader for this exercise. Bennett, Johnson, Williams, and Davis will be under your command." Sarah felt a moment of surprise. Being named team leader was both an honor and a challenge, especially given the tensions that still existed within the unit. She could see the frustration on Bennett's face at being placed under the command of someone he clearly considered inferior. "Roger that, Sergeant," Sarah replied, stepping forward to address her team. "Gentlemen, we'll be entering through the east side of the compound. Our mission is to locate and neutralize hostile targets while ensuring the safety of any civilian personnel we encounter." Bennett crossed his arms and leaned back against a concrete barrier. "And I suppose you've got some special plan involving flower power and butterfly tactics?" The comment drew nervous laughter from Williams and Davis, but Johnson remained silent, his confidence in Sarah's abilities having grown since their conversation at the rifle range. Sarah ignored the sarcasm and continued with her briefing. "We'll move in standard formation, maintaining communication and covering all angles. Remember, target identification is crucial. We can't afford any civilian casualties or friendly fire incidents." As the team prepared to enter the simulated urban environment, Master Sergeant Thompson watched from the observation deck with several other instructors. He had deliberately chosen Sarah as team leader for this exercise, partly because her marksmanship skills made her the logical choice, but also because he wanted to see how she would handle leadership under pressure. "Think the flower girl can handle it, Master Sergeant?" asked Captain Williams, who had joined the observation group. Thompson didn't answer immediately, his attention focused on Sarah's calm demeanor as she checked her team's equipment and reviewed the tactical plan. "We're about to find out, sir. But I have a feeling she might surprise us again." The exercise began with Sarah's team entering the simulated town from the designated entry point. The environment was deliberately disorienting, with narrow alleyways, multiple levels, and numerous hiding spots where targets could appear suddenly. Sarah moved with the fluid grace of someone who had navigated real combat zones, her decorated rifle held ready but not threatening to any potential civilian observers. Her team followed behind her, their formation loose but disciplined. The first contact came from a second-story window, where a hostile target appeared without warning. Sarah's rifle snapped up and fired a single shot,
the electronic sensors registering a perfect hit that would have been instantly fatal in a real engagement.
"Nice shot, but that was obvious," Bennett muttered through their communication system.
"A blind man could have spotted that one."
Sarah didn't respond to the comment, maintaining her focus on the tactical situation. As team leader, she had to balance her own performance with managing her team effectively, a challenge that went far beyond individual marksmanship skills.
The exercise grew more complex as they progressed deeper into the simulated town.
Civilian targets began appearing alongside hostile ones, requiring split-second decisions about when to shoot and when to hold fire.
Sarah's team had to navigate through scenarios where their actions could have devastating consequences if they made the wrong choice.
A particularly challenging scenario presented itself when the team rounded a corner and found themselves facing a crowd of civilian targets with a single hostile figure hidden among them. The enemy combatant was using the civilians as human shields, making any shot extremely risky. "I can't get a clear shot," Johnson reported through their communications system.
"Neither can I," added Williams. "Too many civilians in the way."
Bennett's voice crackled through their headsets.
"Well, team leader? What's your brilliant plan now? Maybe you could paint some pretty flowers to distract the bad guy?"
Sarah studied the situation carefully, noting the positioning of all the targets and the limited angles of approach available to her team. This was exactly the kind of complex scenario that separated experienced combat veterans from training ground warriors. "Davis, Williams, move to the left flank and create a distraction," Sarah ordered quietly.
"Johnson, get to that second-story position and provide overwatch. Bennett, you're with me.
We'll approach from the right and wait for the target to move into the clear."
"That's a stupid plan," Bennett protested.
"We should just charge in there and take out the threat.
All this careful positioning is going to get us killed in real combat." Sarah's voice remained calm but carried unmistakable authority. "Corporal, you will follow orders or you will be relieved of duty. We don't abandon our mission, but we also don't create unnecessary casualties."
The rebuke stung Bennett more than he cared to admit. Being corrected by someone he had been mocking for weeks was humiliating, especially in front of the rest of the team.
Sarah's tactical plan unfolded with precision.
Davis and Williams created the necessary distraction, drawing the attention of the hostile target away from the civilian crowd. Johnson provided accurate intelligence from his elevated position, and when the enemy combatant finally moved into a clear firing lane, Sarah was ready.
Her decorated rifle cracked once, and the electronic sensors registered another perfect hit.
The hostile target was neutralized without any civilian casualties, and her team had successfully completed one of the most challenging scenarios in the exercise. "Outstanding work, Martinez," came Thompson's voice through their communications system.
"Textbook tactical leadership and execution." But the exercise wasn't over.
As the team continued through the simulated town, they encountered increasingly complex scenarios that tested not only their shooting skills but their ability to work together as a cohesive unit.
Bennett's resentment continued to simmer beneath the surface.
When Sarah ordered him to take point during a particularly dangerous section of the course, he moved recklessly, abandoning proper cover and exposing himself unnecessarily to potential threats.
"Bennett, get back in position," Sarah ordered.
"You're compromising the entire team." "Don't tell me how to do my job, Martinez," Bennett snapped back. "I was clearing buildings when you were still playing with dolls."
The comment revealed more about Bennett's mindset than he probably intended.
In his view, Sarah's decorated rifle was evidence that she was somehow less serious about military service, less committed to the warrior ethos that he believed defined a true soldier.
Sarah's response was swift and professional. "Johnson, take point."
"Bennett, fall back to rear guard position."
"You can't do that," Bennett protested. "I outrank you."
"Not during this exercise, you don't," Sarah replied firmly.
"And if you can't follow orders, you'll be removed from the team entirely."
The confrontation was being monitored by the observation team, and Master Sergeant Thompson found himself impressed by Sarah's handling of a difficult personnel situation under pressure. Leadership in combat situations required more than just tactical knowledge, it demanded the ability to manage personality conflicts and maintain unit cohesion when lives were on the line. As the exercise continued, Sarah's team encountered a scenario that would test everything they had learned. Multiple hostile targets appeared simultaneously from different positions, requiring coordinated fire from all team members while protecting a group of civilian hostages.
"This is it," Sarah announced through their communications. "Everyone needs to be perfect here. Johnson, you take the targets on the left. Williams and Davis, suppress the center positions. Bennett, you're with me on the right flank."
The engagement was intense and complex, requiring each team member to engage multiple targets while ensuring they didn't hit the civilian hostages or each other.
Sarah's decorated rifle spoke repeatedly, each shot carefully aimed and perfectly placed.
When the smoke cleared, the electronic scoring system showed that Sarah's team had successfully neutralized all hostile targets while maintaining 0 civilian casualties and 0 friendly fire incidents. It was a flawless performance that even the most experienced instructors rarely witnessed during training exercises. As the team emerged from the simulated town, they were met by Master Sergeant Thompson and the other observers.
The expression on Thompson's face left no doubt about his assessment of their performance.
"Ladies and gentlemen," Thompson announced to the gathered personnel, "you have just witnessed one of the finest displays of tactical leadership and marksmanship I have seen in 22 years of military service. Team Leader Martinez, your performance was exemplary." The praise was well deserved, but Sarah could see that it was having an unexpected effect on some of her teammates. Bennett's face was flushed with anger and embarrassment, his resentment now visible to everyone present.
"Big deal," Bennett muttered, though his voice lacked conviction.
"It was just a training exercise.
Real combat is completely different."
Thompson's eyes narrowed as he focused on Bennett. "Corporal, do you have something you'd like to share with the group?" Bennett straightened up, realizing that his comments had been overheard by the senior NCO. "No, Master Sergeant. Just observing that training scenarios don't always translate to real-world effectiveness."
"I see," Thompson replied. "And I suppose your extensive combat experience gives you special insight into this matter?"
The question hung in the air like a challenge. Bennett had never been deployed to a combat zone, his entire military experience consisting of training exercises and garrison duty. Sarah, on the other hand, was a 3-deployment veteran with actual combat experience. "Tell you what, Corporal," Thompson continued. "Why don't you share your thoughts on real combat effectiveness with someone who's actually been there?" The suggestion was clearly directed at Sarah, and Bennett found himself in an impossible position. He could either back down from his comments or double down on a position that everyone now knew was based on ignorance rather than experience. Sarah stepped forward, her decorated rifle held casually but confidently. "Corporal Bennett, I appreciate your concerns about training versus reality. You're absolutely right that real combat is different from exercises. The stakes are higher, the pressure is more intense, and there's no reset button when things go wrong." Her tone was professional and non-confrontational, but her words carried the weight of someone who had faced life-and-death situations multiple times. "In real combat," she continued, "every shot has to count. Every decision has consequences. And the decorations on this rifle aren't about making a fashion statement. They're about remembering the cost of failure and honoring the people who paid that cost with their lives." The assembled soldiers listened in complete silence as Sarah spoke about combat realities with the quiet authority of someone who had been tested under fire. Her decorated rifle, which had seemed so out of place in a military environment, suddenly appeared to be exactly what it was, the weapon of a seasoned warrior who had earned the right to honor her fallen comrades in whatever way she chose. Bennett found himself with nothing to say. His criticism of Sarah's